Hey everybody, BTO Pro here, and I am currently rocking out the Prototype Raptor. I don't know if you know what Prototype Raptor is, but you should totally look it up on Spotify. So if I keep doing this while live coding this morning, I apologize in advance. So I had an inflection point with an element, thought it was an interesting discussion point. So I was actually going to try and make 3 different ways to do the exact same element relative to its API. So we don't have a CTA. Now, if you're like, I don't know what a CTA is, don't worry, no one does, but it's a call to action. Think of a button so provocative that it's calling to you and you must hit that button. If I don't, oh my gosh, it's shiny and yes, and it's taken me to the link. And this is what marketers do at conferences. But we need one of those buttons and I never want to have to make it again. So what we're going to do is make something called a simple CTA button. So it's a simple call to action for all of those marketing chums out there. So I have this in our issue queue. This is kind of our process, right? We've got a unified issue queue across all our projects because we got a bunch of them. And so, yeah, I even have something silly there like, do it. Okay, so I've set in motion in our mono repo the basis for a simple CTA. If you're not familiar with our mono repo, it's LRN web components. Under elements, you can find all the elements. There's a lot of them. Mono repo structure is just a whole bunch of published repositories out to NPM packages. This way you can manage it in one place. If you have a lot of interrelated NPM packages, it simplifies life. Ubuntu, Microsoft, a whole bunch of other people use it, Red Hat too. It's not like it's just us or anything. So this is just for simplifying collaboration, but distribution goes out in little pieces. So you can use any piece of what we work on, independent of the rest. So what I've got in the background is a window into the craziness of how we set stuff in motion. So for today's video, I want to work on simple CTA, then I want to put it into HAX, and then I want to make sure it works okay in HAX CMS. And that means Troy's yarn starts. I know you were very excited. So I can go to simple CTA, which as you can see where it is on my local file system, and I run yarn start. And you said, 1 yarn start? No, BTO Pro, go with 2 yarn starts. 2 yarn starts? No, dear watcher. I'm going to go 3 yarn starts on you. Yes, that's right. 3 repos yarn started simultaneously. It's never been done before in the history of this screencast until right now. So why we do that is we end up needing to process files. So in the case of, this is honestly part of our workflow. So I'll go to LRN web components. Oh, actually, you know what? So that you know where I am there. I'm in HAX CMS. So we use HAX CMS as kind of the how does this work in a CMS context when we're testing our elements? So I'll go over to LRN web components and we'll go to HAX body. We can see that HAX body has an SRC directory. So we always work out of an SRC directory, which then requires our yarn start and our watch directory process to monitor this file for changes. When it changes, it rolls out a new element. So it compiles it into these derivatives, this haxbody.js and the UMD and whatnot. So just so we're clear on what's going on there. But I have, I think, 2 code windows open. Yeah. So this one is to the whole mono repo, and it's showing what the App Store is in the HAX CMS site. And this one is just simple CTA. So we're going to focus on simple CTA to start. This is kind of our window into our process. Another way that we break out elements, and this really we found helps with a lot of people new to our projects, new to front-end development in general, is we split them out into properties, CSS, HTML, JS, so that you have the individual code highlighting, which is nice. You do end up with some oddities, like it doesn't particularly care for me doing this in place. But so what we're trying to do is create a simple CTA, right? A call to action button. So let's look at what we have as our starting point. And I have 2 API implementations of it, and I want to expand it to a 3rd one. We'll show why. So I go to demo, and see we got all these getting started buttons, a bajillion of them. So first of all, need to make sure that I actually go to index and we save this. And then because I need to update the watch aspect, I have to hit save on the JS file. So it rebuilds, there we go. So this is an example of what the API is doing currently for this, the way that, and when I say API, I mean like how you interface with this element. We treat our web components like they're APIs. That way, when we build it out towards HAX, it's something that HAX can easily integrate with because it's just pinpricking attributes or slotted elements, and we expect to get this as a result. So you can see we can tab to them, right? So I'm hitting tab, or I can hover, and we've normalized hover state. Now, part of how that happens, and part of what's, some niceties built into this, right, is so I've got link, and it says getting started. And if I right click, and we see what this is actually interpreted as, all right, we've got a link, and it goes out the door. Awesome. It's got accent color, which will wire up as well during this because we use a subclass called SimpleColors. But we've got support for, I mentioned this online, but support for if there's a slot because of how this tag is set up. So let's look at the HTML. So this is an interesting little, I don't know if it's a hack, but it's an interesting trick that I don't know why I never thought of this before. But so if I want users to be able to say, hey, you know what? I just want to throw in what the title is, then cool. But if they throw in a slot, the way that this API natively works in the browser is slot will kind of sit there and be like, I got nothing. And LitElement in this case, because we use LitElement to do, or LitHTML does the rewriting of our templates to make sure that that value shows up. So that when we are in our constructor of our web component, right, that this.title is null, the user sets an attribute of title equals whatever, and you see it show up there, right? So that's how this value shows up in our HTML there. Let me move this over. So an interesting thing with the way the slot tag works native to the spec is if there's nothing, it just is kind of there as a placeholder. But as soon as there's any character input, it effectively gobbles up what this is and says, replace whatever the children of the parent are. So it's pretty cool. So what you end up getting is, even if I set a title on these, this getting started is not going to change. All right, so if I go into the source and do title equals stuff, it's still going to respect the fact that it's slotted material of getting started. If I get rid of the slotted material, it then falls back on the title. So that's an interesting little API leveraging here. So part of why we do stuff like this is, right, we're one of our deploy targets, if you will, is I might say, hey, I'm making a theme. Hey, I'm just making SPA. I'm making single page app, a progressive web app, whatever, right? I could just be making one stupid page that has a thing on it. If I want to use the CTA, I, as a developer, know contextually, all right, I just copy this, throw it in here, make sure the reference is there, we're good. However, we really try to make sure that this is stuff that HAX can leverage as well, so because that empowers the next person downstream of us, the person that doesn't know any of the words that I just used. They just want to make a stupid web page. So, and this will be kind of we'll dig into the way that we wire stuff up to HAX as well, but I will get my SPA to show up, or sorry, CTA, I said SPA, CTA to show up here. Now, it doesn't show up here currently because I don't have any wiring indicating that it should, but you can see we have a lot of little options. And one of these past options I've showed, which is nice, is like Twitter embed. So I can dump in a Twitter embed and it actually gets blocked locally. So that's a poor example, but let me pick a different one. Let's see if I can throw a music player on the page. Get rid of that guy. There we go. Okay, I thought that it might have a default that actually did something. So you probably can't hear that on the recording, but it just goes do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Okay, so that's generated, and I can actually manipulate, right? So this is what I'm talking about. There's an API layer, and HAX helps interface between the Elements API and an end user interface. That way, right, we empower someone that has no idea that this is code to be like, I made music on the internet, right? And they could take this source and they could upload a file directly through here. This plays MIDIs, or if they find a MIDI somewhere, you can reference it and it shows up, right? So that is empowerment and getting beyond me, the technologist, always being in charge of what is allowed to be creative on the internet, right? I don't want someone to go to me ever again and ask me to put a music player on a page. I want them to be empowered to just go, oh, music player, right? And not have to think about the accessibility implications. That's me and Nikki's job, and Mike and Chuck's job. That's what we do, is we make sure that the internals of that element and the shadow root and all that is taken care of. HAX is there to make sure they can just dump stuff in the page and be creative, so that they don't need to know what responsive design is. They can just go, yeah, I want this to be a 4-column grid, as another example. Anyway, let's get our CTA showing up there, right? And that's part of why we worry about data layers, treating this that way. So some internals, like, let's stick to the developer side, and we're going to transition towards that HAX integration layer and empowering someone. So you can see in developer land, if someone wants to leverage us, we've got some different options, right? So I could say CTA color black. Nope, that doesn't actually respect that. Thought it would. So we might have to change that. Let's see what's going on there with our CSS properties. So I have a CSS file, and that is supposed to be leveraging. What we got here? Okay, so let's say color and color. So color is applied here, but it's actually a fallback for just gray. So that's wrong. So what it should be is more, it should be more like this. So, and this, if you're not familiar with it, like, where did that CSS variable come from? This is a series of CSS variables that our team has engineered, and Nikki has really driven this, that are allowing you to have kind of 12 levels of any color. So it's called SimpleColors. The way that you get those to show up in your element is you just do a class, whatever extends, in this case, SimpleColors. If you're not familiar with this syntax, these are behaviors, or kind of, or SuperClass, like a portion of a class. And so you can take pieces of a class, have a base class, and then say, oh, and wrap this functionality in. Oh, and wrap this functionality in. So like remote link and active state, they don't do anything by themselves. And I'm actually using this element to kind of pioneer if these are approaches we want to do. But so those CSS variables are there. So the way that I should write that would be more like this. So if I want someone to be able to define this is gray or white, I'm going to default it to this color, but then anywhere that we want to use that, we just put it there. Now, there's a world of thought that, like, you should have multiple levels of stacking context as to what these are, like kind of here's my global variable, here's my local variable, here's my overarching. We kind of skip one of those layers because we have a default series of colors, and this is able to be toggled based on light or dark mode automatically because of the way Nikki has this set up. So we usually go with like 2 levels. You could sort of think of it as 3, as like, here's the fallback of all fallbacks, here's our global context, and here's our local context internal to this element. So we use the host attribute, or CSS selector rather, so that we can add this anywhere, right? So anywhere I want color as the value, we put it. Also, from a naming convention standpoint, right, we always do, and that's hyphen hyphen, you have to, and then for the CSS variable, then we do the name of the element hyphen what the intention in this element is. So you could say, like, well, we want it to be like this, like, because it's in the A tag and it's color. Typically, we'll just stick with like color because it's the color attribute that we're going to apply uniformly. Same with background color or BG color or whatever. So let me clean up that for green as well. All right, go. Green, and let's get red. We're here. All right, red. Close that off. All right, and then you can see I have theme gray here as the outline, right? So let's make another color, right? And we'll do outline. And instead, just to demonstrate how this works, we're going to do gray 12, which is damn near just black, right? So it's just completely grayed out. Let's do this. Okay, outline. Okay, So now I've simplified the way that these are added. And now another thing you can do, right, and this is obviously stuff that add as part of the flexibility in this, is to be like, oh, okay, well, this is the transition, but really it should be like var hyphen simple-cta transition. And you can get a little nuts with these, to be perfectly honest. Like, some people put a variable at every single one of these. Another thing I see people doing is using parts. We might actually shift to using a part in the future, right? But we need a better naming convention for our part. So a CSS shadow part will be something like this. So part equals, might be like simple-cta link. And so you would have a kind of more readable name. That way, in your global document context, you could do something like style, and you could do this. Let's see, because I haven't done one of these selectors, to be perfectly honest. So let's experiment together with this. So this is give me the shadow part called this and of this element. Order 100 pixels, solid black. Like, I usually do something insane so you're very aware of what just happened. All right, so I'll save that, save this, and as I mentioned, I have to save the JS file for no reason. All right, so that did not apply that aspect. However, we should be able to say in here, right? There we go. Okay, so now those colors are correctly applying. So that's cool. So we can watch that stuff fade away, do the transitions, right? Mess with our buttons, right? So we can see it kind of evaporate as far as the CSS. So, okay. So what's interesting, and I actually just noticed this, Castify, which is what I'm using for the screen recording, is actually injecting a web component. It's really interesting. Now it's got an ng version on there, which means it's Angular, but like, this is apps. I mean, it has a shadow root. That's really cool that my screencasting software is using web components for this. Okay, so let's do some more cleanup here. Trying to see. I'm not entirely sure how you do a part selector in this way, to be perfectly honest. Now, you could set part like on the actual thing, so you could do something like this. And I don't actually know that this will help either, but right, so you'd say part will simple-cta link. For the moment, I'm going to do it this way. I know there's a better way of doing this, but so the way I would do, I don't actually have it on there. Let's go back here. I need to actually define this part equals to even attempt to use it. Duh. All right. So this is a part, right? So that it can be targeted correctly. Now in this, let's go back to the way it was, which I think was the right syntax. I'm not positive. Save that. Save our source. Hey, it worked. Okay, cool. So that was correctly defined. You have to actually implement it, Brian. So now you can see the way that you could go about modifying this with part, right? So this is another API enhancement, if you will, from a design perspective, to say, instead of putting in a ridiculous number of these like CSS transition variables, right? The part selector is going to be more specific than this just generic link. So what I could do is, let's just take this back to what it was. I don't want people to be able to use variables for that specific thing. And I'm almost positive, I'm going to have to look real quick at the way that Nikki is using accent color, that we can target our element using there we go. So Nikki has this awesome thing called accent colors automatically in there. You see it says gray. So what we could do is we could say that the accent color should be respected in our element, then set the default attribute or property, translated attribute, of the element to be that color that we want it. So this allows for way more customization and guaranteeing, I know someone's going to call me on that, but guaranteeing accessibility as far as color contrast ratio. So let's hit that. Let's see how that actually works. So let's name our variable more like this. It's not theme red, it's theme accent. And we're going to go in, and all these places it says red, which is just one of them, we're going to put an accent. I do need to talk to her about the way that we could like make this the inverse or like some type of color wheel as to pick another color, but I'm not terribly concerned about that at the moment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a drink of coffee because one can never have too much coffee. It's statistically impossible based on a study that I just read off. Oh, God, it's so good. Okay. Rehydrated. So, all right. So we've got our accent color, right? We've got the outline is going to be gray, and we've got that as white. We're going to update our source now, right? Because I said before it was red. So the way that we can actually have this translated is this dot accent color equals red. That's going to give us this default, but it's going to allow users to actually override it very easily. So then we'll take this style part out. We don't need to do this goofy, crazy black border thing. Okay. Right. And you see outline, neat. And the button, when I highlight it now, is gray. So let's try to figure out why that is. Okay. So let's dig into our CSS. We're saying background color is user selected. So when something is selected by the user, be the theme accent. That's not what we want anyway. Let's do it on this one. See if it actually does it. We also need to fix that outline thing. That's not correct. The outline should just be on this state. And if you're wondering what the heck is this, all right, so what you can do is with web components, you can do a host selector and an attribute is user selected in this case. So let's say that we have a state managed context change. In this case, the user has hovered over our button. I actually apply a certain attribute to the element when it's focused, more or less, but we store it as a variable. The reason we do that is then we can do CSS selection and say, oh, well, when we're in this context, apply these things to the link tag. So let's look at where that comes from then. So, because I didn't define anything with that. Well, we have these two magic classes, if you will. One is remote link behavior, and the other one is active state behavior. So let's take a glance at how those operate, and we'll get them wired up here in a minute. So that's remote link behavior, and this is active state behavior. So active state, and I mentioned this is a superclass. So what you get with active state behavior in this case is a new thing we're going to publish as part of this is imagine this is that like a piece of an element that you're mixing in to another class. So this is kind of your starting point, and then we're extending it into something that's already been extended. It's a little trippy, I know. But all this is doing is it's helping normalize a property for us called isUserSelected. So what I like to do just for UX consistency when I'm making elements in general is I have a mouse over and a focus in state that trigger the exact same property to change. Then I take that property, I reflect an attribute so that when the property changes because of these events, it updates the property internally, and LitElement is helping manage this. This is a nicety of LitElement. Then it's reflecting it, which means it makes it a CSS selector, but it reflects it to the value is user selected, because the default behavior of LitElement is to just say is user selected, all lowercase. I like to keep the camel case and the dash case, hyphen case, whatever you want to call it, in line, so that it's not it makes my life easier later with how many elements we have. So what's going to happen is just when active state behavior is applied, and this is this little set timeout. This is kind of it's sort of a hack, but it's a micro timing thing. So if you're not familiar with micro timing, don't worry, nobody is. But if you think of the execution of the page in JavaScript, it's coming down through everything, and then it says to do something, and it kind of just keeps going. It's like this asynchronous pieces are kind of showing up whenever they feel like it. What this does is say, oh, well, I'm loading up the context of this element. Oh, there's this thing. I'm going to wait until a micro task. It could be a millisecond later. And that's a subtle difference, but if you think more in terms of like, hey, you're applying an event listener, there's actual processing that happens in the browser for that event listener to be applied. Do I care? Like, I don't need the events necessarily in this case to be there at first paint. So while an incredibly small thing in the weeds, imagine we have hundreds of web components on a page and all of them have events that are being applied. Doing this one little thing could shift the balance. That could be 50 milliseconds or so. It could be far more than that if you have low resources, or it could be like nothing and you don't really notice. Either way, it doesn't hurt, but it shifts it to the next micro task, so that you get painted that much faster, and stuff like this doesn't block. Nobody cares about this, but in this case, there are sometimes events you do need to listen for at first paint. But so I normalize mouse over and mouse out and focus in and focus out. That way, when you tab to things, you get the same exact behavior as if you were to hover over them with a mouse, or tap them with your thumb or something. So this stuff gets mixed into simple-cta. Also, there's remote link behavior, which I have to actually wire up correctly. It's almost like that was on purpose. So we'll do that next. But for now, let's see if we can't get this respecting our color shifts. All right, so it's red, right? And there's that. I'm hitting tab. You have to just trust me, I'm hitting tab versus mousing over, okay? So, and you can actually witness it in the DOM, right? So there's user selected. If I go off of it, right, it's not selected. Now, it's another nice thing for debugging purposes to go like, oh, well, shoot, I didn't actually know the box model was out there, which it is, right? So maybe these buttons aren't display block. Maybe they're like flex. Oh, maybe they're inline flex. There we go. And then you have to say, okay, well, let's make sure, all right, so that margin, right, we're not touching the element. Now we're touching the element. And you can see that attribute gets set in the DOM. That's what you're getting with that reflect capability. Is pretty cool. So if I expand this out, you'll actually see, there you go, all right? So there's the user selected. And it doesn't influence anything internal to the element, but I could have it influence things internal to the element. Something that does influence internally the element, and is kind of a little known security thing I'm finding, is right now I have a link that goes to hacksweb.org. So most likely, and not always, but most likely, let's say I threw the CTA into a page and it goes to some other website. I don't want them to leave my website. I want that to be like, oh, here's, click here for the PDF that has our last quarterly annual report. But I don't want them to actually leave to go to the report contextually, right? I kind of want the report to open in another tab is most likely what happened. But there's a little known security tidbit that when you have a browsing context of a window that says open, and the way you do it is href equals blah, blah, blah.com, and then you put target equals underscore parent or underscore blank is what it is. Because in the infinite wisdom of APIs of the past in HTML, Why would we ever need something more logical than using an underscore to declare that a window is not named that? Anyway, if that window is open, technically there is some browsing context that can share data and functionality between them. There's a way to break that, though, and it's called no rel, no opener type of a logic. So let's see what the heck I just am talking about. So if we go to remote link behavior, which is another kind of mix-in piece of an element that we're grafting on, because this is a reusable chunk of functionality, but it's not really a web component and it's not really a full class. We get remote link behavior. So looking at that with remote link behavior, we have taken into account updated lifecycle, which is a hook that runs in LitElement and says whenever a property changes, this is going to process. So we're actually adding in 2 properties, and I need to now actually add them in. So let's find our active state behavior. This is a little snippet here that I throw in. So then we take remote link behavior, because I hadn't actually put the properties in, right? And then we're going to put in a remote link target. Remote link target is a string. And we're not going to do those. We don't care about it from a stylistic standpoint. And another one we're going to put in is prop.remote link URL. And we're going to do type string. Okay. So now this is going to mix in these 2 additional classes here, or properties, into our class. Now, whenever they get changed in any way, it can recalculate what the link target is in this case. So now I've got to think of how we would actually go about wiring this up in a generic way. But the interesting aspect of this from a security standpoint is saying, okay, if the target changes or the URL changes, and target in this case is like an element in the DOM, right? So it's in a shadow root potentially. This is just any element that I need to apply this functionality to, saying like, hey, here's a link that we are monitoring. If the property changes in the element, I need you to update something about this shadow rooted element. So, okay, so imagine this is targeting that a href whatever. And actually, one way we can go about implementing this is we go into our simple-cta. We say, okay, there's link and those things. And then here we go if prop name, or actually, sorry, the target doesn't change. So we can use the first updated. And first updated in LitElement ensures that the shadow root is ready for us. So what I'm going to do is say if super.firstUpdated, and this is just a little thing to make sure that anything I mix in is going to run its functionality first. Then we're going to do this dot remote link URL target, which is coming in from that partial element grafted on. This dot shadow root dot query selector a. And so what this is going to do is it's going to set this property to the actual DOM node reference of this tag right here. So what we can do internal to this is say, oh, well, we've got a remote target and then we've got a remote link URL. So what we're going to do with remote link URL is up here, we're going to say, well, if prop name equals, and in this case, it's link, right, is internal to this element. So if it equals link, so link has changed in some way. Then what we're going to do is do this dot, remote link URL equals this prop name. Now, this might look a little weird syntactically, but the reason I use this is it's a reference to link. So imagine that's the same as saying this dot link. Why I do that, just in general, is in case this changes name, I've got the word link in less places. That's, just a personal convention. It's not a huge deal. I could put link, doesn't matter. So if we have a link, right, and the default is it's just a hash, so it just sits there. So, okay, so we've got link change is notices changed, and we're setting the target. So we're not going to know that we're talking to this A tag in our shadow root, and that we're going to be knowing what the URL is that's been updated. So, whoops, didn't want to do that. I wanted to go back to remote behavior. So why we care about that, what this functionality is providing us is when either of those change, this is going to have a change record, then it's going to run this function, right? So we've got target passed in and URL. And what we need to make sure is that we have a target, right? This is just a very easy, hey, you've got a, there's a thing. So what we're going to do then is say, okay, figure out if this is external. Now, I don't even need to set this that way. I can just do this. So if the URL is external, and then again, in this case, I can do, right? So I like to work my way backwards through things, simplifying the logic. Okay, so if we have a target and we have a URL and that URL is remote, and the way that we are external, the way we calculate that it's external, in this case is if there's an index of HTTP, or if there isn't an index of HTTP, then it's false. Now, what we could also do is say, because that technically you could have like cool stuff / HTTP, right? So this is saying if it's not 0, is the way to avoid that. It's not just doing like, is it in the string? So this is saying, does the link start with HTTP, which is going to pick up HTTPS as well. So it's a full qualified link somewhere else. If it's not, or so if this isn't 0, right? So if it is 0, right, be like, this is the first thing in here, then we return false, meaning that it's, I think this logic is actually backwards, to be perfectly honest, but we'll see in a second when I have this wired up. But so imagine we know that something is a remote link is what we're trying to say. So if it's a remote link, we want to keep going. Yeah, okay, so that's what this is saying. So if the beginning of the address does not start with this, right? So it's not at position 0, then bail out. If it is at position 0, that means we have an external link. We're going to take location.href because it's a where's location coming from? I don't actually see. Oh, you know what? This is not split out this way. This is got to be like URL. Ooh, got to see how we're going to have to see how we resolve that. I was almost positive I already used this somewhere else. Let's see about that. I'm nearly positive. Yeah, let's say I know other things have this behavior. So I guess it's, so this is window.location. So it's, okay, I see. So it's trying to make sure that it's actually an external domain as opposed to just a reference to something on this same domain. Got it. So you can see I actually use this in 2 other elements. So this would be another instance of where you should potentially look at using a behavior, right? I have a very highly repeatable pattern, in this case, outside link, detecting that something's external for the purposes of securing it in some way, right? So URL target. In this, what is it, promo tile, if you're linking externally, this is going to return a value, right, into the template. So it's going to say, hey, make this link's target something external as a result of me changing. Now, this is a Polymer element that definitely is going to need updated at some point. But stop node isn't. So stop node uses outside link, and outside link has this exact same behavior. So if we get this working with our one element, we can actually throw out this code and use a dependency. Now, that becomes a question of, do you want another dependency, or is there a likelihood that these elements are going to show up in the same page, at which point you're actually saving code that you're shipping to the user? Because if I have this one dependency and both these things use it, we ship in an unbundled manner. Some people might just say, well, you just write the code and your deduper will figure that out. But we ship our code unbundled. So there will actually be a file that just has this snippet in it that loads and then it gets hydrated into the rest of the class structure. And then when the next time that reference comes in, the next element just skips that. It goes, I already know what that is. Coffee break. Oh my goodness, we need more coffee. What are we doing? This doesn't even make sense. I mean, this is only my second pot today. Unbelievable pour. Just thank you, Bodum. Wonderful. So, all right, we got our URL target, outside link. We can refactor that after we get this first one working. So we're going to do active state behavior there. We got remote link behavior. But I was in this window when I was working on it. So we've got our remote link behavior is hopefully wired up now because we're setting these two values. So we'll see what happens. So let's save that. We'll see. We don't have any errors. That's always a good start. All right. So it did not correctly detect that this is external, or it didn't refresh. I've been having a lot of goofy tooling issues going on here, unfortunately, as a result of what item I'm saving. But let's save that and see if it, be sure. Okay, so we know that that's external. So let's see if this code's even running. This is part of how I do my debugging. So, all right, we've got active state behavior and remote link. So let's go into remote link. And let's see if this actually ends up running. Console.log target. Didn't run there. Nope, didn't run there either. That's not good. So, okay, let's go into, let's see what this is compiling as and make sure. See, updated, and there's a issue right there. I wrote updated, but I didn't use super. And so we're going to basically, well, that one doesn't have super in it, but this one right here, there we go. Okay. So I need to inherit that. A little annoying. Not the end of the world. There we go. A lot more traffic there. So you might say, what did that do? It did that. So if we look at this one, we do not have target blank rel no opener no referrer. That no opener no referrer is the security aspect I was mentioning. So now if I click this, it opens in a new window. So we've got our call to action, and you can read the annual report right now. Sorry, I should probably hold this up when I do that, like old timey. You can read our annual report, something like that. But it's in a window and browsing context that is no longer connected to the previous window. And you might say, oh, duh, it's a different tab. But that's not actually the way that it works when you open something in a new window. They can kind of talk to each other because this second window spawned from the first one. It's super in the weeds. But if you were to open this up to some exploited domain, that domain could technically talk back to who was referencing it and maybe access some of its data. So just so we're super safe, we add this in, which is an API enhancement because they did not remove this very obviously security issue. But so it takes care of that for us. So this is a nice little, and again, this is where we get into some like accessibility processing issues as well as security processing issues. If I'm that user that our group is trying to empower, right? I don't know what the hell any of what I just said is. And I shouldn't need to. I shouldn't need to be able to create a security or accessibility issue if I'm just trying to be creative on the internet. So if we make this like green, well, it's going to have to respect the fact that I made it green. So we better figure that part out. But so let's wire that up because it's clearly not respecting our color selection here. And I think I might know why. But let's see if we do dark. Yeah, it's not respecting that either. So we do have to fix that. Okay. But so it is now respecting our remote link capability. It's also respecting our state management, right? So that state is its own little piece of a thing so that we can normalize what that is. Awesome. It also means, and this again, when I say state management, that we should be able to do is user selected. And then it activates, right? So something else could say, hey, I need you to tell that link that it's selected now. Now, another thing that might be nice with that is to go, if it's user selected but not focused, then focus it. But that's bonus points. I'm not going to do that right now. I don't know that that's actually the way I would want it to work. But, so we've got our simple-cta. Let's figure out what's going on with that style issue. So let's look at our assembled element. And I think I know what's going on here. Ah, yes, it says styles function. So SimpleColors is inheriting. It has kind of, think of it as like a super.styles. So Nikki did create a way of handling this. There's this block at the top that says list shared styles below. I'm actually going to have to look at our tooling real quick and see how the heck that even works. I've never used this. Shared styles, so it joins those in. All right, so let's look through our stack and see where she's done this. I've never once used this ability in this way. I normally don't use this grouped element function. It's actually defined in package.json. Oh, that's interesting. So in package.json, listed, but I don't actually even, oh, this one's using it. Ah, there we go. That's how she did that. Okay, that makes sense. So she's put into our tooling in package.json the ability to throw in whatever styles you want. So it's kind of super flexible in that way. But this is saying spread operator of super.styles is going to get worked into the output of our build script. So what you'll end up seeing is this. That way you could add in other shared styles. I totally get why she did it. It's very future looking because we don't do a lot of that. Like here's a singular glob style sheet, at least not to my knowledge yet. But it, as usual, Nikki's planning 15 steps ahead of me. So, all right. The way that we would do that then, and she also had this ability, I don't know if it uses this still, where you could write out what they are here. I think you might have changed it to package.json base, but I forgot about that. So we'll do this. Oh, and you can do it with shared props too. Let's see how shared props works. Maybe it does the same thing. Nope, that's not wired up. Okay, not a big deal. Oh, yeah, there it is right there. Okay. So, yeah, probably we would need to do that in the future. Somehow we need to account for that in the same way. Huh. Okay. Well, I could do this, I think. Yeah, we might have to put in an issue about having the super props spread across this. But I think the way that I'm doing the I think because the way I'm stacking the classes, that's not a big deal. But that's definitely something, right, that we'll have to add support for. So let me, and there's shared HAX props, which I have not, I don't think we have the ability to merge that yet, but that'll be awesome if we do. So let's go to the issue queue, make sure I don't lose that. Issue queue, tooling, implement, right? Shared styles, but for properties. Okay. And I'm actually going to assign that to Nikki because I didn't write that functionality. So hopefully she can do it really quick because she knew how to do it with the other one. I had not thought of how to do that. So, okay. Back to simple-cta. So now, because I added this into the package JSON, I'm going to have to actually stop the tooling. I stopped the wrong one, darn it. I'm going to find the right one. Here it is. Okay. And then I got to start it again because that's a reprocess that. Styles. Hey, now it's doing the right colors. So that means it worked. Yay. Now, it's not cycling between them. I'll show you why in a second. But let's look at what that ends up getting us as a result. So now I should be able to do blue. And it fades to blue. And now when I do hover state, we still got nothing. Oh, there we go. Okay. Blue. I was like, and no, it does nothing. So, all right. So there it is. And now I can also do dark. Yeah. And this is how we can start working on guaranteeing accessibility, right? So this, as long as you get these color ratios accurate, right, as far as the spread between them, and you can see the difference down here as to what the selector is. As long as we get that spread correctly, then we should be able to eliminate contrast issues. It says, I don't detect any contrast issues, so that's awesome, right? So that is what I'm talking about, where we solve accessibility or security issues at scale for the end user, as well as a developer. Like, I don't have to think about that stuff. I just want it to work. So, all right, let's go back into our element then. We got our properties, link and title. We're doing the external detection correctly. We've got our still super simple thing. We've made it more accessible because of the link involved. And we've also got this part associated. We did want to fix this to be inline flex as its default. Or actually, let's make it inline block because the link itself is inline block. Well, let's do, maybe it's the link is block, but the host is inline block. This is how you get the, trying to line up the box models between the two. And you can see I have display flex here. So we got all kind of fun stuff as far as attempting to figure out the way to do this. So let's do flex on that one. And then in our demo, we'll probably want to demonstrate the difference. And we'll do these two on divs, div. And then we'll copy and paste. Okay. So then we should be able to have two together and two on separate lines. We'll see. Again, I gotta, close that file. Let's open up our JS file and just hit save. Oh, default is red, right? So this was the other issue I had mentioned. So in our CSS, right, we said that the background color is user selected, right? So that is that a selection state has been applied, right, as we have here. If we're in an applied selection state, then we turn red. And the default accent is green if there's no color classes applied, but there are. So what we want to do is say that in the simple-cta, the accent color starts at green and fades to red. Now we could also, we might have to mess with this to be like a secondary color, secondary accent kind of a thing, and you can see it already updated in the background. It's pretty cool. So now as I tab between these, right, we go red. Awesome. Click, it goes up in a new window. Now let's try to fix this whole box model thing. Yeah, see, because I'm still able to highlight these out here. That's not useful. So make sure that we save that page and then we save this process. All right, let's see what's going on with Flexbox. Oh, come on. There, okay. Simple-cta. Display block. Honestly, that's probably the way we want it. I want it to be, the entire thing, because if the container's not, then, you can mess with this to, it's just what the default is, but it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be activating it way out here, right? So consistency is the key here, because I can hover this and see what the box model is. All right, if we do inline block, now we are at least not taking up the entire real estate. So maybe we should start this out at inline block, right? Then the link is block and our span in here is flex, right? So you got to mess with some of this stuff. That's a little annoying, but meh, not the end of the world. Let's get our JS to update. Come on. Okay, so now we have our two buttons in line, these ones all the way over there. That's kind of what we were going for, right? And then this bottom one, maybe we'll take something internal and we'll change it in the demo, right? So then we can override this, just to illustrate you can override inline. So the inline override would be display block. Super important, right? And this would be like Start now. You too can make $1 million with this CTA tag. And then this one we're going to do simple-cta, and we'll do dot super important, because we all know what is super important out there is a CTA. So we're going to do class equals super important. And we'll do font size 50 to make it extra important. Margins. All right, so messing with some aspects of this to show that you can actually manipulate it. And in this case, we'll do display block, but we'll do width 50%. See what that does. It does stupid stuff is what it does. But again, you can modify it, so that's fun, right? Start now, hack today. Something super important. We could also in here leverage the CSS variables, right? So we can go into CSS and then we can hijack some of these. So we can say, well, let's say the state of user selected. Right, and close that. We'll do this variable equals orange. Or we can set it to another CSS variable, which is what we should be doing, right? So that could be, orange could be the fallback. But if we look at our naming convention, instead of accent, let's do, oh, actually, you know what? That would be interesting. I could take let's see how that works. I could do accent, and let's set the accent here to 8, so there's a little more contrast. We'll do red 8 as our default. But then what we'll shift it to is accent 2. Okay. Right, so now it gets super bright, and now you have a accessibility error. So we should shift it to dark. So let's shift it to 11. Right, so it's going to be within whatever the accent is in question there, which is kind of cool. So that's another way that we can handle this, even just in the element itself, right? Instead of this like violent shift in colors, I could do, all right, let's shift it to, like dark green or whatever, right? Because dark green is a real color. So we'll say our default is to go from 7 levels to 10, right? But our text on this is white in this case. Now, something else you could do with this, right? If you're really trying to be consistent, right? Is I could say, all right, instead of using gray, we use accent at different levels based on what you're interfacing with, right? So I gotta tell it to save the JavaScript file. Okay, so now the outline technically is green, and the text technically is green, and the shift technically is green. Right? Now you might not want that effect, so we could definitely change it so that it's just pure contrast of black and white. However, what we can do now is get, and I've done this in some other elements too, right? So we can do accent color equals purple, dark, and then we'll just do purple on this other one so you can see the difference. Purple, right? And that we get that same color ratio shift in reverse of what we would anticipate happening. Right, so it's still, and this is how you programmatically set contrast. So I think that's where I'm gonna leave this at this state for the moment. That's kind of what I wanted with it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna wire this up to HAX. Right, we spent all this time investing in the API for our element in question. So now I think it's time to wire it to HAX. Actually, you know what? There was one more thing I wanted to add before we went HAX land from a developer perspective, and that was another progressive enhancement technique. So right now, with the way these APIs are done, right, I can sort of progressively enhance. I can bring the text in, at least start now is there, but the link will get lost. So let's make a third option for integrating with this API. This is fun. It's not that hard even. So it's cool. So we go in the constructor, we can do this.innerHTML. It's going to tell us at initial time it's setting up, what are the children. So I could actually query the light DOM children at initial runtime. Now, you could set a mutation observer. Some places we do, right? That would be a bit more stateful in this example. But in this specific element, and think of how many buttons could be on a page, I only want it to happen at runtime. Like, look and see if there's a link in there. If there is, use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if this.query selector, right? And we're just going to see if there's a link in the shadow or in the light DOM at initial paint. If there is, console.log, and we'll just do the query selector dot get attribute, right, ref. And the idea is that we would actually take this information and populate our tag with it. So I'll put this in, and we'll also console log it so you can see. And then we'll do this dot title, right? We do the exact same thing, but we're not doing get ref. We're actually doing inner text. And then how will we get rid of that? Well, let's see. Let's see what the implication is there. Okay. So the way we would leverage it if there's a link used in this is this stuff stays the same. Title is going to get destroyed effectively because of the children that are slotted in unless we destroy the children after siphoning the data off of them. It's a fun approach that I've seen Nikki use. So what we can do then is just say this.innerHTML equals nothing. Oh no! Actually, let's set it to null. True null. So true nothing. So now if we go to our demo, we need to implement it in this way, right? So this is like the progressive enhancement way of implementing the same quote unquote API. So for this last one, what we're going to do, our simple-cta, we're going to say aref equals whatever. Now, title is in the text there. Now, why would you do this? Because this is a pure progressive enhancement approach. When a screen reader, or sorry, not screen reader in this case, SEO robot, screen reader of super legacy content mode would hit this, if somehow the JavaScript fails, that link is still there. So save, and let's see what we get. Something super important still. So if we actually look at what's going on in this, we can see there's no light DOM anymore. So at runtime, it gobbles it up, leverages what was in the light DOM from a pure data perspective, and then ingests it and says, oh, sick, we should probably do this with it. It's a cool third option, if you will, as far as leveraging this from a data management perspective, right? So I now have 3 ways as a developer to influence this in the way that we integrate it into the page and get the same result and have the same state management. I also have shown at least 3 different ways you could do it with CSS, right? Either with the variables, with part, or direct setting of the styles in question. So ton of flexibility in just a stupid call to action button. But the key is I don't want to exist in this job again. This video should never exist contextually, okay? No one should have to watch this to go, and now I know how to put a web button on the web so that we can have someone click a PDF link for our annual report. So now that we've made the last CTA to ever exist, the way to get it out of your repertoire is to get it into HAX and then integrate HAX into things so that other people can be in charge of linking to the PDF. So here's how we do that. So we've got our pure design asset. This has all the API flexibility and richness that we wanted in it. And now we're going to wire it up to HAX. So what I always do is I find other HAX wiring that already exists because we've written it a lot. Video Player has some very, very rich HAX code, but we'll go with stop note. So to look at what stop note is real quick, let's go back a level. And actually, I got a yarn start HAX body. So we'll go with a fourth yarn. Now it's on to the fourth yarn start because I redid that one. So let's go to stop note and we'll yarn start stop note. So we can check out stop note as well. So here's stop note. And stop note just provides a stop sign, a little error message, warning, right? And an icon. Got some progressive enhancement capabilities, slots, all that fun stuff. So just so you have seen what it is. Now, we go back into stop note. The way that we integrate things with HAX is two-part. One part on the part of the element, which is to add a static get HAX properties to the element. Or in the way that we do our tooling, we can actually put this JSON blob in a file and it'll put it in. But reading this, right, is telling HAX how to work with this element. So can I be scaled? Can I be positioned in the interface? How should I be presented, right? What's my name? What are some labels, right? Basic descriptive information. But here's the important part. We'll skip quick. How should I build a form is what HAX is saying here. So, I, stop note, have a title, and you should put me on the interface as a text field. I am a required field. Here's some description to write, and here's the title. So this is an abstraction of something called JSON schema. And it's called, in our case, it's HAX schema, but HAX schema is an abstraction of JSON schema, an actual standard, so that we can say, oh, well, you want to point to something? Well, use a HAX upload. And HAX takes care of the form element, takes care of validation, takes care of, do you want to use a URL or your webcam or an upload field? All that just happens. Do you want to map to a slot? Do you want to pick a different icon? We've got all kind of ways to wire this up. Also, there's demo schema. As far as like when someone dumps this in a page, what should it say? So we can have, like a little silly demo that shows what to do with this element so that they can repopulate it. Anywho, let's take our simple-cta, and we'll use this as our basis. Copy. And then we're going to go over to our simple-cta. Okay, so I mentioned we have a simple-cta HAX.json. Oops, I cannot put that. There we go. It's going to get ticked at me because this is a JSON file and it wants valid JSON for the whole stinking thing, but it'll still work. So if we go to, move this up for a second, so I'm going to change this, just say JS. There. It's a little more appealing visually. Package.json, let's make sure, it says use HAX false. Let's set this to true. This will influence the tooling. We'll show what the output is initially here. So I've got simple-cta. Let's go in and rewrite this HAX source a little bit. Okay, so can you position a button? Yes. Can you scale a button? Yeah. So this is going to be call to action. Okay. And we're going to say a simple button with a link to take action. Icons, let's leave it at report at the moment. I don't know if there's a button. I'm sure there's a button icon. Where I get that is on either webcomponents.php.edu, which is not what I meant to type. Let's go to webcomponents.org. And I usually just search for like icon. Or actually it's iron icons. We're still shifting off of those. Iron icon and demo. I believe that the demo for iron icons is going to, it doesn't have all of them anymore. Yeah, we'll have to update that. I need a location to go to that just shows me what all these are. Actually, we have one in our tooling. What am I doing? So it's icon set demo. A fifth yarn start. So icon set demo just runs through every possible icon we have. Why didn't I do that first? So I'll search for the word button, and we'll find a button. Well, there's only two things called button. Okay, it's weird. Square. There we go. So we'll use, we'll We'll use this one because that's a decent icon. This is usually code for like, hey, at some future point in time, you should probably make an SVG of that, which is what we've done. So, okay, now I've got my button. Again, I stopped HAX body, darn it. Icon set demo. I don't need all these yarn starts all over the place. But okay, so we'll use, oops, image, crop 16:9, right? And this is just going to be like marketing, content. It handles type text. I'm also going to put in type link. Whoops. And this is what does it map to. So we'll do type link, and this is source on that side. In internal, it's called link. And then we also have title, and it's title on this side. Let's get rid of this type text thing. This doesn't make a ton of sense yet, most likely to you, but this is effectively logic internal to HAX that says, hey, I got a link. What is this? Is there any way we could present this link or this media or content? And so this handler is basically saying the simple-cta element, if HAX has been given a URL, I am allowed to render URLs. So it comes into play with getting data from backends and things like that. But okay, so nice. We have that first part. As I mentioned, I'm not using quick at the moment, so let's just drop that. So what we have is configure. So we have a title. We have a URL, but the property is not URL. It's actually called link in this case. But we'll say link, right? Enter a link to any resource, right? And this could be a HAX upload in this case. In the instance of this element, we're not going to use the slotted methodology that I mentioned, just to simplify things. So the only two things we have at the moment is title and link. Now, I believe we can also do, we can interface with the colors. Now, again, I usually just borrow past things that I've added. So let's find one for accent color. There we go. Okay. So, all right. So this is HAX schema for mapping to accent color and providing a color picker, even better, and dark mode, which is a Boolean, so that we can give people that ability as well. So, okay, we're going to throw this into here. All right. Okay, I don't care about the spacing of this necessarily. All right. Some minor validation. So we need a link and we need a title for this to make any sense at all. Cool. We don't have any advanced settings, and demo schema. Let's get rid of this one. You can actually support multiple demos that show up some places, but we're not going to have any content in here. Right, so that's your slot area. We're not going to do that. And then the tag, which is a little weird. You have to say what the tag is, but technically you could have multiple elements defined in one blob of schema. But so we'll do simple-cta, and the title is click to learn more. And the link is a subtle reference to hackstheweb.org. All right, so the default is going to be that. So now I got to stop the tooling on this element, where it's probably this one. Okay, and we get started again because I made that change in package.json. So, all right, fire this back up. Now, in the DOM, we shouldn't see anything change. It should just be, hey, it still works, yay. So, see what is actually happening when these files are combined. We end up getting HAX properties, yay. So it's got HAX properties there, it just maps it over and writes the name of the function correctly. See, I've also got our super properties in there, yay. Also cool. All right, so our element is positioned to work with HAX. It doesn't work, it's not in HAX yet. I need to show it somewhere, right? So the way that we get it to actually show up in HAX is through something called the App Store. And so the App Store has apps, which think of this as endpoints you can search, backends you can pull information from, potentially places you could save information if you have it in like in a CMS context, something like that. So I've got some default example ones wired up here, like Vimeo or YouTube, Flickr, NASA. NASA I always end up demonstrating because it's a really high quality public API. You don't need a key or anything. YouTube, you need a key. So then there's stacks, which a stack is it's like a grouping of content. So if you want to think of this as like a virtual DOM, it sort of is. HAX uses kind of a VDOM approach as an intermediary. What you're actually seeing is the real DOM. And then it takes that, translates it to a virtual DOM for sanitization purposes, and we call that HAX schema. And then it converts it back into DOM nodes. So you can see we use this for storage, so we can actually dump in a stack of items, right? So a template, if you will. And then there's blocks, which are just grid layouts. Blocks actually might go away because stacks does everything blocks needs to. But here's the key. Here's how you get your element to show up. So we've got Autoloader. This is the things to automatically load the definitions of at runtime. So HAX is going to go through its bootstrap. It's going to set up. It's going to be like, hey, this is the area of the page I care about, right? It's loading all those imports and things. And then when it's ready and done, it's going to then kick off asynchronous calls to these elements, import their definition from the class structure, and then look and see if it has a HAX properties definition. If it does, then it's going to read that off, pass it around its state, and then when I open up the HAX interface, I'll be able to place a code sample on the page or whatever is defined here. So the definition is said as name of the tag, where's it from? So I'm going to add in my simple-cta, and then I know where it is in my setup. It's simple-cta/simple-cta.js. So now I've got that in my app store, which means I'm going to do yarn start on HAX body. Wait for this to start up. This is one of the more aggressive things as far as tooling. So yeah, we'll give it a little bit of time to import everything that it needs because it compiles it to make sure that it can power this demo. So while it's doing that, and I usually fire it up and then I hit refresh, which means that it's cached all the compiled copies so it'll run smoothly. And this is just purely in the tooling and local development. Like that doesn't happen out in production. There we go. Now it has all the definitions. It's just because this is importing hundreds of tags that the ESDev server has to compile on the fly. Or actually, we still use Polymer CLI for this specific element because of how beefy it is. But all right, so edit content, right? And I get my form. I can click and it knows that I've clicked on a paragraph versus an image, versus something more fancy like a cover image, right? And I've got the form built. Now, let's find our CTA call. There it is, our call to action button. And it has the little button icon. And then if we dump it in the page, we end up getting our defaults of click to learn more. No color is set on it, which is different from the default, mind you. So it defaulted before to gray, or sorry, not gray, to red. I think I changed it to green. But if the DOM being set says there's no accent color, it's going to fall back on whatever the thing before it is, which was gray internal to our element, right? So we just go between gray and black. Now, if I hit dark mode, we flip, right? Because the default there is gray. If I say pink, and this is where empowerment comes into play, right? I have now given a user the ability to take a button or a call to action and put it into a UI. And it's a pure design element. So I don't have to think about the way someone has integrated this or teach them how to integrate it, teach them HTML, right? That little bit of schema on top of my design element liberates me of needing to care about that. And furthermore, if I made a mistake in what we just, what you've just walked through with me here for this, like over an hour or two, if I made a mistake, it's traceable back to a singular reference, right? From a singular file, which is why we keep things that way. So in this grid plate, if simple-cta has a accessibility error in it or security error, I, as the developer, know the place to fix it. The person at the other end that integrated this doesn't think about that. That's no longer a consideration for them. There are hundreds of thousands of hours wasted annually in academia and other places, I assure you, just going back and going, oh, shoot, that color wasn't accessible. And I set it as a style, and I don't know where I used this. I have no idea where I used this. This makes that process accountable. And so now I can go and fix simple-cta and the definition and push it out to a CDN. Like this is how we integrate these. And then it just updates everywhere. So you can see that I am now using HAX to write these tags into the page. Right? And so I put it in this grid. Instead of click to learn more, we can change this to like, download our report. And you can get the report at hackstheweb.org/thing.pdf. Right? And you can see it recalculating remote link behavior. So I need to go in, update my remote link behavior. But the critical thing is that now I've got these buttons, right, that I can mess with and say, okay, if I had 3 columns, does it look right, right? So we can kind of start to put this in context, see if it makes sense for our users, come up with ways that they could actually, maybe they do not a 3-column layout, but they do like a 3-column narrow, wide, narrow, right? So we space things nicely, dump the button in there, and dump the download our report, and then they click to learn more. And this is, again, then becomes something where I say like, oh, well, okay, it's kind of obnoxious. If I click and it opens, that starts to become a conversation internal to our team of like, whose UX problem is that? Is that the button because it's a pure design element? Or is that a problem of HAX needing to say, disable these click-throughs? Now that could be a little tricky. It's actually kind of one of these edge cases between worlds, right? Because there is a link that you can click on this. Now, a way that I could handle that is if we look, it says, hey, content editable, right? There's traces of a data layer here where HAX is in the moment of editing indicating this is being edited, right? So I could actually say like, hey, if you're in a content editable state, we need to disable the click event. The way we could do that very easily, because we need to, basically, it's the pointer events that we care about. If you're tabbing through, less concern, because we'll get the tab context right, that you can't tab to it in the same way to execute the event. So as a simple, right, a couple of last cleanup things here. One is I got to get rid of that remote link is doing a console log. Yeah, so we need to keep console logging this. So we can get rid of that. Another one, oh, I took out the console log there. Okay, cool. So another one would be to go in something super important, CTA, CSS, okay, would be to say if we're in a content editable state, right, which would be host content editable, so then the link pointer events none. Let's actually see if that does what I think it was. I haven't actually thought through fully how to accomplish this because I haven't had any CTAs previously. Action, throw it on the page. Now we don't have click events. So save. And now we have to actually, right? So now I go, oh, shoot, there's a problem. But if I tab to it, whoops, I can actually do the thing I wanted. Okay, let's see here. So call to action. It has a link. Let's prove that it can actually be changed. Cool. All right, and then we'll save it. Huh. Oh, content editable. Oh, that's interesting. It still says content editable true. I don't. That's curious. I don't think it's supposed to still say content editable true. We'll have to fix that. Yeah, that's supposed to come off of it. Interesting. It comes off of all the other ones. Okay. I'll have to fix that. Let's see if that actually in some bizarre way is because I set this. I don't think it is. Save. All right, edit. Okay. Call to action. Save. Let's right click. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to have to literally do something that makes sure that that doesn't get dumped in there that way. I've not actually seen that happen with content editable being reapplied or not being taken off of the tag. So that's something specific to HAX needing to make sure it gets rid of content editable all as one big word. However, it does correctly get rid of, right? So we are active. If I click to it, right, or if we hover it, is user selected. It's kind of fun that that kicks in. So we can see, we can click to this. It's like as we click down, it actually is applying HAX active, you can see, right? So there is a bit of a state change, if you will, that I should be able to intercept almost, that there's a mouse down event there. But that's honestly, that's pretty minor by comparison to what I was just messing with. So this was the correct answer. There's an issue in HAX, and I need to make sure that that goes away, but that's cool. So if we have content editable applied to the element, then we need to prevent the pointer events from going through. Cool. All right. So now let's see what that looks like in a full-blown content management system as opposed to our little example here. All right. And I've still got the buttons here, and they can still, right, tab, do, click, whatever. But let's go. Here we go. We've got window open to our HAX camp demo, which is running HAX CMS. Oh, I need to actually, I think I need to add that to the App Store for this one first. Yeah, okay, so there's the App Store for this. Oh, I actually already added it in preparation for this. Cool. So it could be there. So let's see. Call to action. Throw a call to action down. And now we have it in the context of a content management system, and it's got that disabled state, right? And so again, just this is for, you know, internal testing, so that we can see it in the context of some different themes and start to make an evaluation of, all right, is this actually doing the design considerations that we had in mind, right? If, you know, this is one of the endpoints is in this theme. Whoops, I'm going to drag that below the video. There we go. All right, so yeah, this is effectively the process we end up going through end to end of building a design asset out of thin air and then making sure that it works with everything we're doing, right? Try now, right? It could be like a try now button. So this could also call for me having to take into account some different design aspects of what this is. Oh, there's a narrow, narrow, wide. Let's go with narrow, wide, narrow. Oh, hey, it's in place. And we'll take that and we'll do layout. And then we'll say it's in the center, right? Because I can position it, right? And then if I, and this won't save, it won't do anything. But if I hit save in the CMS, that would then save the content. And again, this is just example space that we do for testing. So in a real environment, it would save and then you get the response back. Anyway, if you want to get the code for this, it is available at github.com, elmsln, LRN web components, /elements /simple-cta. You can piece through it, you know, see if you can pick apart my example. If you lasted all the way to this, thanks for watching. Make sure you check out haxtheweb.org or hax.camp. If you want to join our channels where we talk about these things, help people integrate elements, make web components, you can go to bit.ly/hax, HAX, Slack. So it's HAXSLACK. Catch you later.